This is a little bit of a risky thing to share because I'm pretty certain I know what the reaction will be, but I want to honor and appreciate my son, whose 18th birthday is today. Now, the caveat is you can't all go up to him after service. So if you see him, you got to just be like, it's just too much, you know? But one of the things that I want you to know about Trey is that he is someone who, from a very, very young age, has spoken life into me. And I remember when he was about 3, I was getting ready to go out one night. And I'm sure he was living in an environment, there was a lot of chaos at that stage. And he walked up to me, and he looked me right in the eye, and he said, "Mommy, you look so beautiful." And it may have been true that I looked beautiful, but I think what he knew at a very young age was the power of his word. He knew that he had the capacity to create a world through the use of language. And so I'm very grateful to have him in my life. I've always said that my kids really raised me. And, there's this idea that you know what you're doing when you're parenting, and such is not the case. So my mom's best friend is a woman named Pam. And Pam is the one that gave me the name Lola. She named me Lola the day I was born. And for 20 years, she was the only one that called me Lola. My birth name is Laura. And for 20 years, it was like this sweet call into my essence. That's how it occurred for me. It's not that Laura isn't who I am. It's just that there was an invitation that I felt like she was always invoking when she said Lola. Like, express yourself. Be fun. Be playful. Be here, who you want to be. And a number of years ago, Pam's mom laid her body down. And she was sober 35 years when she laid her body down. And so in honor of her and her life, the memorial service was an AA meeting. And every person that shared about this woman referred to her as Dolly, happy, joyous, and free. And I was so struck by the thematic sharing that occurred through the entire meeting. And for anyone that has familiarity with the 12 steps, that's from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it sat with me for years that was the tenor of her memorial service. So I want to read that part of the big book for you. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. Now let's just stop with that for a moment. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. We try not to indulge in cynicism over the state of the nations, nor do we carry the world's troubles on our shoulders. Important to notice, it's not that we don't discuss the world affairs. It actually says we try not to indulge in cynicism around the world's affairs. Those of us who have tried to shoulder the entire burden and trouble of others find we are soon overcome by them. So we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. We have recovered our wholeness. We have recovered and have been given the power to help others, because when you help others, you get out of your own narcissism. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. Now, it's important to understand these words. The way that I would say this is that the natural order of life is to be happy, joyous, and free. You know, if we're always uncollapsing the idea of God as a being outside of us. And I don't subscribe to an idea that God wants for anything. God is the presence of joy. And so its natural order is to create happiness, joyfulness, and freedom. We cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a vale of tears, though it once was just that for many of us. But it is clear that we made our own misery. Can anyone relate? God didn't do it. See, the idea is that you have free will. You have the ability to make choices, and your choices have an impact. But the law, consciousness, is impersonal. So you get to create, you choose. Avoid, then, the deliberate manufacture of misery. But if trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate God's omnipotence, which means all power. So here's the trick. Anything that we are experiencing suffering around is our own manufactured experience. That is true at the level of the individual. That is true at the level of the collective. A couple weeks ago I said, if we didn't believe in poverty, poverty wouldn't exist. But we have a group agreement around poverty, so poverty exists. That's all in the realm of consciousness. If we did not believe that war was required, war would not exist. But we believe that war is necessary because we believe that we are separate from one another. And if we are separate from one another, there's something to defend. So that was written in 1939. About 20 years earlier, a guy named Ernest Holmes gave a lecture, and it's cataloged in a book called Love and Law. I know that under the right systematic training of thought, individuals can make themselves happy, prosperous, and well. So that is what we must learn. You are sitting in a community that is a part of a larger movement called the Ancient Wisdom New Thought movement. And this is a liberation philosophy. This movement is one that stands to liberate the mind from colonized states of thought. There is something that has infiltrated the human mind, and it is producing a realm of affairs. And to the extent that we can wake up, we can unravel from that. Consciousness is awareness. It is our ability to witness ourself. The title of my talk today is, What Are You Solving For? Consider that you are in a formula. And if you are in a formula, then you have the capacity to determine what the variables of the formula are. It's just a law. You know, the other day, I was given an invoice for services that Nathan and I had been given. And the services and the cost of the services were greater than I anticipated, which meant I had to write a big check. And I watched my mind go like, I wonder how I could get out of this. It was like real subtle, but it was like, I wonder if I could delay this. I wonder if I could postpone this. I wonder if I could tell this person that the 15th would be better. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are not of your highest self. Because what's true is you have the capacity to pay, but you're seduced into a trance of scarcity. So this all happens in a nanosecond over here. And it's like, oh gosh, Lola, okay, take a breath. What a gift to have been given these services. What a gift to pay for these services. I am living in the flow of all that is good. There is a source and supply and back of all things. See, I have to do that. Maybe you don't. But this is like an internal dialogue that is always going on over here. I am in a constant negotiation with myself. Which will you believe to be true, Lola? And so I took a deep breath, and I said, don't wait 2 hours. Pay it now. So I got on my phone. I paid it right away. Literally 3 seconds later, my phone pinged. Someone has gifted you money through Venmo. I was like, oh my gosh. That is how the law works. As you say yes to whatever you say yes to, you will get more of that thing. So if you say yes to lack and limitation, and so it is. If you say yes to freedom and prosperity and abundance and living in the flow of life, and so it is. It's impersonal. It is no respecter of persons, places, or things. So we kicked off this week a class called Calling in the One. And this class rocked my world 11 and a half years ago. There are 3 premises of this class that I think are a perfect backdrop for us this month. It's not too late to join the class. It's your last week to try. So number 1, life is a creative process, and our thoughts, beliefs, assumptions, choices, actions, and words are tools that we use to invent our experiences and our circumstances. There is always a creative process at play. You are always creating. You are either creating from an awake state or a sleepy state. Number 2, we have the ability to create circumstances and opportunities in our lives by setting clear intentions and by committing to and living in alignment with these intentions. And number 3, when you alter your relationship with yourself, your external world will alter accordingly. See, there's something that the 12-step program understands that is not dissimilar from the New Thought movement. There is something that Dolly understood. I'm going to keep affirming who I say I am, such that I become more and more of that thing. So when you lay down your body and people are reflecting on the contribution that was you in this lifetime, what will they say? Wow, happy, joyous, and free. Happy, joyous, and free. I would be okay with that name. It was as if that had become her name. And she was living into a future of that. Just pause and take a breath. What are the predominant characteristics that people are left with when they encounter you? Just be honest with yourself. Could be self-righteous. Could be controlling. Could be passionate. Could be somber. Just what are they? And then ask yourself, what would you like them to be? And then who would you have to become to create that? Who would you have to become to create that? The practice of recovery occurs through service because it casts a bigger vision of you. When we are circling the drain of our neuroses, very little is possible. Consciousness is awareness. And it is a discipline, it is a practice in every moment. So when I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, "Ooh, I don't want to pay this." Which one will you feed? You've all gotten that email. Which wolf will you feed? It's just consciousness. Which consciousness will you feed? So Ernest Holmes goes on to say, whatever it is that hinders your progress is nothing but thought force working. And when you learn how to destroy it and get rid of it and know the truth, it will depart. Stop looking at the world as a conditioned thing governed by matter, matter, matter. Let matter alone. You are more than this meat suit. You are a spiritual being that has come into this time and space to create. Now, what will you create? I'm not talking about what job will you have. I'm talking about from what state of consciousness, what state of awareness will you create from? In every moment, the invitation is to ask, where am I? Am I in fear? Am I in lack? Am I in limitation? Or am I in love? Am I in generosity? Am I in contribution? To the extent that you are in the trance of your sleepy state, you do not have access to even inquiring that. And look, there are areas for each of us that we're asleep in. This is a non-linear process. So what are the areas that are calling for your awakening? What are the areas that are calling for you to wake up to? What this says is your progress is nothing, whatever it is that hinders your progress is nothing but thought force working. And when you learn how to destroy it, in New Thought communities, we oftentimes don't like to talk about destruction. It would serve us to destruct, to destroy the spaces in the subconscious mind that are holding us in patterns of fear. That's not a process that happens without your active participation. That requires you saying, cha, cha, cha. Like, can you imagine walking through your subconscious mind all the time? We talked like maybe 2 years ago about the spiritual ninja. It's like, can you imagine you're just navigating through the subconscious mind, and every thought form that you have is contributing to the collective consciousness of humanity. And every thought form in the collective consciousness of humanity is vying for your attention. So if you are walking through the world like, you're asleep. Whatever your version is, that's how it looks for me. So I want to break down these two ideas because there's the level of consciousness at the objective, the collective consciousness, and then there's the level of consciousness at the individual. This goes by many names. Race consciousness, the consciousness of the human race. And there's personal consciousness, individual consciousness. You are influenced by all of that. Before people can realize the truth, which is to free them from conditions, they have to eliminate all thought that is negative as a race suggestion and as an auto-suggestion. Race suggestion is that which you've inherited. It's the collective consciousness that comes from your family, comes from your community, comes from the world that you live in. Autosuggestion is your individual consciousness. From the standpoint of the race suggestion, they must erase from their mentality any beliefs within that they are born with a limited condition. Anything in you that is wanting to seduce you into an idea that you are somehow limited must be erased from your mentality. That is an active process. They must realize in its place that they have a spiritual birth born from an infinite source, that they are now living in it and filled with limitless life and boundless freedom. You can go further than that and cease suggesting to your own self unconsciously any auto-suggestion that you are limited. So when that thought form came up and said, there's not enough, that is the moment of choice. Who will you be in that moment? You know, like tired, story. Cold, story. Poor, story. Totally fine. You get to choose. You are an infinite being that can tap in to the unlimited, pure potentiality of this universe. And it will confront your ego like nobody's business. So, which is more valuable for you? The ego construct, which, by the way, will never leave. The inquiry is rather, is it running you, or are you just dancing with it? Because what happens is we think we are our ego, and it's running the show, and we fall asleep to it, and then we get seduced into all kinds of circumstances and conditions, and it's formulaic. It will produce a particular outcome. You can look at every single area of your life, physical health, financial wellness, relationships. Apply these principles to all your affairs. The first step, I am powerless. My life has become unmanageable. A lot of New Thought folks don't like that. I'm not powerless. When you're in your ego, you are. When you are identifying with your ego nature, your identity, you are powerless. I have to create a life for me. I don't know, I just heard someone's like, oh, well, you know, she's probably sober. Actually, I'm not. I mean, I am sober. But I don't have anything against wine, love it. So if you're trying to figure out if you're supposed to be in a 12-step program and I'm that loud voice that's haunting you, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just asking you to glean the wisdom from the program. My life has become unmanageable. I turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God. I of my own self do nothing. It is the Father within, the presence within that doeth the work. When I identify with my ego structure, life gets real messy. When I identify with my higher self, life is much easier. They're both consciousness. You choose. The reason this is so important to me is that I think that this is the greatest ministry that this place offers. There's a reason why we aren't out there doing soup kitchens all the time. The challenge with those activities, if we don't get to the consciousness in back of the thing, is we just participate in the perpetuation of the thing. So it's not that we should not serve in soup kitchens, But if we aren't actually altering consciousness, serving in a soup kitchen does nothing. And by the way, I'm not talking about the consciousness of the people who show up. I'm also talking about the consciousness of the systems that perpetuate the need for soup kitchens to exist. A lot of times people hear the New Thought rhetoric as like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps agenda. That is an oversimplification and a bastardization of the teaching. The circumstances and conditions that we find ourselves in as a society are a result of collective consciousness. The circumstances and conditions that we find ourselves in individually are a result of our own consciousness. You and I inherited consciousness from our family of origin. If you are not doing an active practice of reconciliation around what you want to bring with you and what you want to leave, inertia will set in. It will just go a particular way. So you might choose to look at your parents or your family of origin and do an assessment, not a resentment list. Do an assessment. Wow, if I were to trust that my parents were doing the very best that they knew to do in any given moment, and I bless them in all of the mess that they may have created, now who do I want to be about the matter? Because you can choose. That's the incredible thing about this part of the brain, about the higher states of consciousness. You have access to choice. So the days of making your folks wrong must be over, because you are an expression of consciousness, and you are an awake being. The last thing that I ever want to do with anyone that is struggling to make a demonstration is collude with their limited sense of self. The last thing I ever want someone to do with me is to say, yeah, I can appreciate those limitations that live in you. Who wants that? No one needs those kinds of friends. I want the friends around me that are like, come on, show me more. Show me more of your brilliant self. Show me more of your loving heart. Show me more of your generous nature. I don't want you to collude with me around my limited sense of self. So it says here that there is race suggestion and autosuggestion. And you must realize that you are part of a spiritual birth, born from an infinite source, and you're now living in it, filled with limitless life and boundless freedom. You know, Nathan has this fantasy of having a housewife. Maybe I've told you about that before. And I'm like, honey, I am not that girl. Number one. Number two, we also are served by my income. And if you want me to even be able to consider being a housewife, we would need to sell the house. There are a whole series of things that would have to occur. But the attachment to having a housewife and the reality of having a life that costs X dollars and a wife that works like all the time is where suffering lives. That's just consciousness. I asked him the other day when it came up, I was like, oh, here we go again. Do you want to sell the house? Because we can't even in this now moment create what you're wanting without selling the house. That's where my mind was. Well, no, I don't want to sell the house. I'm just saying. But let's get clear. What do you want? There's nothing happening in your life right now that you could not transform or alter. If Nathan and I get on the same page and we say we don't want to keep spending all this money in the lifestyle that we're living up to and we have to maintain all this stuff, then just make a new choice. So what is going on in your life that you want to alter? Your friends don't want to hear about your suffering anymore. They want you to be your greatest self. And if they don't, you got to get new friends. So, Jeffrey, I'm going down the rabbit hole on quotes today. I hope you'll forgive me, beloved. The reason I'm doing that is because sometimes we hear different things from different things. So Ernest Holmes goes on to say, first, I had all of my own thought to overcome, my own observing of false condition. Then I also had to heal myself of what other people said about me. You start to do a new thing, and people will say it can't be done. See, when you start to disrupt states of consciousness, you'll start to hear a lot of pushback in the world around you. When you start to disrupt the way that people know you, it's uncomfortable for them. It's uncomfortable for them because don't you feel better when, it's like when my mom was just my mom and she was a stay-at-home mom, that felt better than when my mom started to become a sexual being. I was like, I don't want to know about all that. I prefer this state of consciousness. You are becoming someone greater, broader, bolder than your family of origin knows you as. That's very scary. Substitute family of origin with community. Substitute family of origin with high school friends. Substitute family of origin with coworkers. Do you want to be the boldest, baddest being in your friend circle? Or do you want people calling you forward into higher states of consciousness? If you're the boldest, baddest being in your circle, you're playing a very small game. I want people to wake me up into a higher state of consciousness. I have my family's permission to share all this, right? Sometimes people get worried. We have a family agreement. So the bottom line is this month is that we are on an exploration around the realm of consciousness, around the realm of awareness. Where are you placing your attention? If you are placing your attention on that which is broken, wounded, lacking, limiting, you will create more of that. Who here knows Bob Proctor? By a show of hands. I don't know. Bob Proctor may be like 92 at this point. Bob Proctor came into my world like 20 plus years ago. And the first time I heard him speak, he said, get yourself set up on an automatic debt repayment plan and then start focusing on prosperity because you keep focusing on your debt. Debt could be a metaphor for whatever it is you're focusing on that is not the highest and holiest version of you. Who your partner's not being, what your job isn't providing, how your kids should be showing up in the world. Place your attention on that which you want to create, that rather than that which you don't have enough of. Because consciousness creates. You will become a vibrational match for that which you choose. The 40-day practice that I was in with the Abundance book by John Randolph Price had me in a daily practice to get my mind right around what is the source and the supply of my money. so that it was much easier to hear the voice of scarcity when I was invited to pay for the services that I had used. If you don't have a practice, inertia sets in. The lower state of consciousness is the predominant form of consciousness just by way of evolution. If you are not in an active practice of getting up, you may come in here some Sunday mornings and be like, damn, I'm so sick of that happy music. There's a reason. It's very hard for you to sit here and be pissed while Tiffany and Amira are singing higher and higher. It was like, Man, that's a lot of energy. It's a lot easier to surrender to joy, to surrender to your happiness. To surrender to your freedom. Walk in a state of consciousness this month that says, hi, my name is Lola. I'm happy, joyous, and free. People will be like, oh gosh, let me go the other way. That's fine. They're probably not your people. Hey, my name is Lola. I'm happy, joyous, and free. People are like, create a wake of happiness, a wake of joy, a wake of freedom. What are you solving for? What are you solving for? Are you solving for your limited sense of self? Are you solving for your reasons, your considerations, your limitations? Or are you solving for love, for joy, for peace, for freedom? Can you imagine if this community solved for that? We would have to get our bloated nothingness out of the way. That's what Emerson said. Get your bloated nothingness out of the way. Damn. Well, he didn't say that, but he did say get your bloated nothingness out of the way. This is the final one, Jeffrey. Your final emancipation will be written by your own hand, or it will never be written at all. It will be thought out by your own mind. No one is keeping your freedom from you. You are keeping your freedom from you. That does not also mean that there aren't systems and structures that need to be confronted. But so long as we stay in a victim state of consciousness, the systems and structures will never change. The systems and structures are in place because there's a collective agreement around bondage. Your emancipation is up to you. Your freedom is up to you. Consciousness creates. The consciousness of humanity is ready to be free. You are ready to be free. So free yourself. All right, many blessings.